General Hospital. Spoilers reveal that, as someone who has spent a significant part of my life following General Hospital, I find myself in a rather reflective state these days, watching not only the events unfolding on screen, but also the storm of speculation that seems to be building just beyond it. There is something uniquely unsettling and yet strangely fascinating about the way the current conversation surrounding Nancy Lee Grahn has taken shape. I have seen controversies come and go over the years, but rarely have I witnessed one that so quickly blurs the line between fiction and reality, between the carefully constructed drama of Port Charles and the unpredictable nature of real life. What strikes me most is how easily a narrative has formed, almost as if it were a storyline crafted by the writers themselves. The idea that Grahn has somehow fled the United States for Canada due to political pressure, that her outspoken remarks have triggered consequences so severe that they might cost her the role of Alexis Davis, is the kind of dramatic premise that would not feel out of place within the show itself, and yet here we are discussing it as though it were unfolding in real time with real implications. I cannot help but ask myself, how much of this is grounded in truth, and how much is the natural tendency of audiences to amplify uncertainty into something more sensational? I have always believed that long-running shows like General Hospital thrive not only on their storytelling, but also on the stability of their characters. Alexis Davis, as portrayed by Grahn, has become one of those rare figures who feels almost inseparable from the actress herself. Her presence carries a certain weight, a history that cannot easily be replicated. If there were to be a recasting, it would not simply be a matter of introducing a new face. It would require a redefinition of the character's emotional identity. That is no small task, and certainly not one that can be undertaken without consequence. And yet, the rumors persist. There is talk, persistent, insistent talk, of a possible dismissal, of producers being forced to reconsider their options, of a new Alexis waiting in the wings. I find myself pausing here because this is where my years of experience as a viewer begin to assert themselves. I have learned that not every rumor carries weight, and not every controversy leads to a tangible outcome. But I have also learned that where there is sustained discussion, there is often at least a kernel of truth, even if it has been reshaped and exaggerated along the way. What complicates matters further is the context in which these rumors exist. Grahn's public statements, particularly those expressing dissatisfaction with the political climate in the United States, have clearly resonated with some and alienated others. That much is undeniable. But does that alone justify the idea of a crackdown, of professional repercussions severe enough to alter the course of her career on the show? I remain skeptical. The entertainment industry has always been a space where strong opinions coexist with professional obligations, and while tensions can arise, they do not always lead to the dramatic outcomes that speculation suggests. Still, I cannot entirely dismiss the possibility of change. General Hospital has endured precisely because it is willing to evolve. Over the decades, we have seen characters recast, storylines rewritten, and entire narrative directions shift in response to circumstances both within and beyond the control of the writers. Perhaps what we are witnessing now is simply another moment of potential transition, one that feels more intense because of the emotional investment many of us have in the character of Alexis. If I imagine, even for a moment, that these rumors were to become reality, I find myself asking a series of difficult questions. What would a new Alexis bring to Port Charles? Would she honor the legacy that has been built over years of storytelling? Or would she represent a departure, a chance to redefine the character in ways that might surprise us? And perhaps most importantly, would the audience be willing to accept such a change, or would it create a fracture that the show would struggle to repair? There is also the matter of timing. The current storyline involving Alexis, particularly her involvement in supporting Brooklyn and Chase as they consider adoption, carries a certain emotional resonance. It is a storyline rooted in compassion, in guidance, in the kind of quiet strength that Alexis has come to embody. To disrupt that narrative with an abrupt casting change would not only alter the character, but potentially undermine the storyline itself. That is a risk, and one that I suspect the producers would weigh very carefully. At the same time, I must acknowledge that part of the enduring appeal of General Hospital lies in its ability to generate precisely this kind of anticipation. Even the possibility of change, whether real or imagined, creates a sense of urgency. It draws viewers in, encourages discussion, and reminds us that this is a living, evolving story. In that sense, the current situation, however uncertain, has already achieved something significant. It has reignited a level of engagement that many long-running shows struggle to maintain. And so I find myself in a position that may seem contradictory, but feels entirely appropriate given the circumstances. I am both concerned and intrigued. I value the continuity that Grahn brings to the role of Alexis, and I would prefer to see that continuity preserved. At the same time, I cannot deny a certain curiosity about what might come next, about how the show would navigate such a profound change if it were to occur. In the end, what matters most to me is not the rumor itself, but the way it reflects the enduring connection between the audience and the show. We care deeply about these characters, about the actors who bring them to life, and about the world of Port Charles that has become, in many ways, a familiar and comforting presence. Whether Nancy Lee Grahn remains in her role or not, that connection will continue to shape the way we experience General Hospital, and perhaps that is the most important point of all. Shows like this do not survive for decades by avoiding change. They survive by navigating it, by finding ways to honor their past while embracing their future. Whatever the truth may be behind the current speculation, I have no doubt that the story will continue and that we, as viewers, will be there to follow it, questioning, reflecting, and, above all, caring about what happens next. As someone who has spent years, even decades, watching General Hospital, I find it deeply unsettling to even consider the idea that the legacy of Nancy Lee Grahn could somehow be diminished or undone by circumstances unfolding off screen. This is not simply about an actress or a series of public statements. It is about the fragile relationship between a performer, a character, and an audience that has invested years of emotional loyalty into both. When I think about Alexis Davis, I do not see controversy. I see history. I see courtroom battles, personal struggles, redemption arcs, and a complexity that has been carefully built over time. That legacy cannot be easily erased, no matter how intense the surrounding noise becomes. And yet, I cannot ignore the growing concern that if Grahn's public remarks continue to escalate, especially if they begin to intersect directly with criticism of the show itself, then the situation may evolve into something far more serious than simple disagreement. There is a difference, in my view, between an actor expressing personal beliefs and an actor becoming a source of disruption to the very production that sustains their role. I do not claim to know where that line is drawn within the industry, but I have watched long enough to recognize when tensions begin to feel unsustainable. If the narrative shifts from external political commentary to internal criticism of General Hospital, then the stakes change entirely. It is no longer about personal opinion. It becomes a question of professional cohesion, of whether the environment behind the scenes can remain stable. And this is where the word disaster begins to enter the conversation, not as a certainty, but as a possibility that cannot be ignored. If Grahn were to continue pushing her statements further, if those statements were perceived as damaging to the reputation or internal harmony of the show, then the producers might be forced into a position where action becomes unavoidable. That is not something I say lightly. Removing or replacing a figure as central as Alexis would send shockwaves through the narrative structure of Port Charles. But what troubles me even more is the idea that such a development could retroactively affect how her past work is perceived. Would viewers begin to look back at her performances through a different lens? Would the character's history feel altered, not because of anything that happened within the story, but because of what occurred outside of it? I hope not. I truly do. Because the strength of a long-running series lies in its ability to preserve the integrity of its storytelling, regardless of external turbulence. At the same time, I cannot deny that General Hospital has always been resilient. It has survived cast changes, creative shifts, and moments of uncertainty that once seemed insurmountable. If this situation were to escalate into a genuine turning point, then the show would, as it always has, find a way to adapt. Perhaps a new interpretation of Alexis would emerge, one that seeks not to replace what came before, but to reinterpret it for a new chapter. Still, I return to the same lingering question. Does it have to come to that? Must the legacy of Nancy Lee Grahn be placed at risk because of a series of statements that, while controversial, exist outside the fictional world we have come to cherish? I would like to believe that there is room for balance, for a way to separate the artist from the character without diminishing either. In the end, what I feel most strongly is a sense of caution, not panic, not outrage, but a quiet awareness that things could shift if the current trajectory continues. This is a moment where restraint, clarity, and perhaps a bit of perspective could make all the difference. Because once a legacy begins to fracture, it is not easily restored. And for those of us who have walked alongside Alexis Davis for so many years, that is not an outcome we would welcome lightly.